When most people are looking for a house to buy or live in, they usually look at things like location, square footage, how many bedrooms, bathrooms, appliances, renovations, whatever you're looking at when you're looking at a house. But one of the most important statistics that people forget about, and including myself forget about, is actually elevation. And this video applies to anybody that's looking to buy a house, that owns a house, that rents, that is looking to rent, looking to move. So it's important to know elevation of the area you're in. And I've really started to look into elevation since Hurricane Helene. That really started my deep dive into this. And since then, I've realized how important it is to know where you are in relativity to elevation and flood zones, and just being aware of that. Natural disasters and hurricanes are here to stay. Unfortunately, it sucks, but it is what it is. And as you can see from the recent hurricanes can stray 500 miles off coast and hit North Carolina, which who would have expected that? You would never expect that, but they can stray 500 miles off of the coast inland and hit and flood and cause mass destruction in towns. So it's important to know this, even if you're not in Florida or Louisiana, even if you're in Chicago or Carolinas or Tennessee. It's important to know what your flood zones are and be aware of where you're living. Now, I own multiple houses in Florida. Luckily, all of them are on higher elevation. I think I got lucky with that because I never really looked into it. Also, I usually buy cheaper houses and they're usually more inland, and more expensive houses are usually towards the coast. So maybe that's the reason why I just couldn't afford that low elevation houses. But jokes aside, I did get lucky with that because where I own houses just a mile away, there's flooded neighborhoods and flooded towns and destroyed houses and areas. So this is the website we're going to be looking at. I've tested a lot of them. I found that this is the best one with the map. It's the most intuitive. It's called firststreet.org. This isn't a sponsored video. You can see you put address here at the top, and I'm going to put an address of a house in Asheville, and we're going to zoom in Asheville, and I'm going to show you what to look for. So this is just a random address that I put in here. And you could see that there's some scores here. 1 out of 10 flood factor, 1 out of 10 fire, 2 out of 10 wind, 3 out of 10 air, and 3 out of 10 heat. So what you do is you scroll down here and you go to the community risk map, and this is what you're looking at. So when you're looking at it, this is what the map of Asheville looks like in comparison to the United States. You can see the little code here. So minimal, and then as it gets darker blue, it gets more extreme. And as you can see, Asheville is in a flood zone. Now this house that we're looking at is coincidentally not in a flood zone, or not as bad of a flood zone. You can see this house is also are in major to moderate flood areas, but then these houses are in extreme. So that's interesting. There's small little changes neighborhood to neighborhood that can really affect if your house is getting flooded or not. You can click on flood current and future maps, and you could see where the flood is majorly. So it's just a little bit north and around the area. I'm sure this house still did face some minor floods, but this is a really good location in proximity to being just a mile up north, and you're in a completely different area and experiencing a completely different situation with the hurricane. So we're going to scroll over to Florida, and as you can see, there's dark blue areas here. Now, I think one of these, I forget which one, but one of these is Cedar Key. You'll be able to see the risk level of the floods in these areas. And this is why these areas got hit so hard. I think this might be Cedar Key right here. So this is something that you would want to be aware of if you lived in this neighborhood, the risk level of it. I'm going to show you 2 more examples. So in the city of Tampa, there's 2 little islands here. This island is called Harbor Island. This one right here is called Harbor Island, and this one is called Davis Island. But you would assume if there was a flood, they probably have the same elevation level. Even an airport is on this one, but they don't. Davis Island here has a lot lower elevation than Harbor Island. Here's an article from Fox Tampa Bay, and you'll see that it talks about the flooding in Davis Island and how it got hit hard, where Harbor Island still got hit by the hurricane, but not nearly as bad and not nearly as much flooding as Davis Island experienced. Why is that? Why is this island getting more than this island? You'll see the elevation levels on both is extreme. If there is major flooding, these are coastal houses, they're gonna get flooded. It's just how it is. But between these two, you'll see that there's a lot more blue dots here than just the dark blue ones, and that highlights the elevation levels. Although it's not a huge difference, it is a difference, and it was the difference between this article being written about Davis Islands as opposed to being written about Davis and Harbor Islands, or just Harbor Islands. Let's say you were moving to these islands. If you were looking for one of these houses and you were debating between this house and this house. Well, this one looks nicer than this one, but apart from that, this one is on a higher elevation than this one, and you would want to know that before buying. And as you get more into Central Florida, it's a lot less flooding, although there is flooding. And you'll see that some neighborhoods flood, like this neighborhood experiences a lot more flooding than a neighborhood up here, for example. So you would want to be aware of that before you buy a house here versus here, because if a hurricane did hit, you're more likely to get flooded here than here, just because the elevation level is likely lower in this little pocket. I'm gonna give you one last example of Miami, Florida. So this is Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, and you'll see that as you get towards the ocean, there's a lot of flooding. And that's obvious. It's intercoastal, it's on the water. But then you'll notice as you get further west, there's flooding, where there's a lot of flooding here, which is more Everglades, but there's also a lot of flooding here. Well, why is that the case? Why is there so much flooding here? Well, there's a lot of lakes here, but also it's because of the Miami Rock Ridge. So this is the rock ridge. It's a natural rock ridge in Miami. And here's another graphic where you can see the feet difference, where this is 0 to 1 feet. And then as you see, you can get higher up to 10, 11 feet. And there's some pockets that are 15, 16 feet. And this is a natural rock ridge in the city of Miami or in the county of Miami. But it can be the difference between your house flooding if a hurricane hit Miami and not flooding. Although more than likely all the houses would flood, but how bad, how severe would you experience the flooding? Because this area would experience it a lot less than this area. So it's very important to know, and that's just a natural little structure of the rock ridge. And you'll see the difference between what 1 mile can do, where 1 mile can be the difference between you being here and being here. And you would want to be here. Now, of course, location and safety and houses and price play in factor. But assuming all the houses are the same price and you're choosing where you want to be in a higher elevation area. Now, another way of doing it is going on realtor.com. And realtor.com actually has a way that you could see it. So this is just a random house I clicked on. But when you scroll down, you'll see the environmental risks and you'll see flood factor, minimal, fire factor, all of this, and then you can click on it and you could see the FEMA score, so 1 out of 10. So this isn't a good area for flood. Now we can actually search this address. As you can see, it's further west, so it's far away from the water, which is a good reason that it's not going to flood. But if we click here, we could see the elevation, and it looks like it's probably right over there, like over in this area, and it's a little bit of a higher elevation, not too crazy. Yeah, that's just interesting little stat, but the realtor.com has a really good source for that too. I hope this helps. I hope you learned something new, something that you would want to look into if you're renting or buying. This really applies to anybody. So send this video to somebody that's, looking to find a new place, and make sure you're aware of where you are, because you can't prevent a natural disaster, but you can't help yourself stay safe.